welcome to a special edition of the LSU Sports Insider, coming to you live Saturday night, which we will post this Sunday morning because I'm sure everybody's out partying or something like that here in Baton Rouge, and Koki Riley's got to get himself a decent night's sleep up there in Hoover, Alabama, because certainly LSU has run him through the ringer. With a surprising and deep and thrilling run here in the SEC tournament. The Tigers are making their 20th appearance in the SEC championship game. They will face Tennessee at 2 p.m. Sunday on ESPN2 live from Hoover Met. And it has been, and this is saying something for the LSU baseball program, this has been among the wildest rides that anybody has ever seen from the LSU Tigers baseball team. And so with that, we will get into it. We felt we had to come to you sort of in a semi-emergency here just because Saturday's game, a thrilling win over South Carolina, is truly one of the most remarkable and certainly one of the most unique LSU baseball games, frankly, that we've ever seen. And that's saying something. That's part of the beauty of baseball. Of course, you never know what you might see at the ballpark. And we certainly saw something new at Hoover Met, and Koki will run that down for us. How you doing up there? Are you making out okay? You haven't visited the Cheesecake Factory 18 times yet, or how's life in Birmingham?
It's been interesting. It's just been a really wild ride, and I've been sweating a lot because it's really hot and humid down here, and constantly getting water, and it's been a lot. This week has been a lot. It's been exhausting. It's been fulfilling at the same time. And as you were saying earlier, like, when is the LSU program and LSU baseball, really LSU sports in general, not entertaining? Like, they are the Russell Crowe meme of college sports. They are.
That's a great way to put it.
Exactly. And this game it perfectly encapsulated that, and we can get into it right here.
Well, so just a quick synopsis. The last time, of course, that we have come to you, we were previewing the SEC tournament, and let's obviously LSU felt well. I don't want to speak for Jay Johnson. He made an impassioned plea that he thought that LSU should make it in no matter what, even if they went 1-out at the SEC tournament. But you know what? The fact that he pitched Gage Jump, his number one pitcher, against Georgia on the first day of the tournament, tells you that maybe he felt like he probably needed to go ahead and make sure that they got one win. They did get a huge win, a big RPI win against Georgia, followed by another even larger RPI win against Kentucky the following day. They come back in yet another thriller to beat South Carolina on Thursday night. And they had a day off, which they desperately needed to come back for the semifinals against South Carolina, as it turned out. And they face South Carolina Saturday afternoon again. And Koki, this was one of, as we said, this was one of the most remarkable games you could ever hope to see. And let's start with the issue that everybody probably wants to talk about, which is what the hell happened for 18 minutes while everybody was trying to sort this out, to set up everything, in the 10th inning. As LSU is out there against South Carolina, what went down? Why did the umpires need to confer for 18 minutes? And why did so many LSU fans feel like their team got jobbed on a call?
Yeah, so let's just start with the situation at hand before there was a pitch thrown or anything, any call made or anything like that. So they were runners on first and third and 2 out, and Griffin Herring had just come into the game for Gavin Guidry. After Guidry had walked a couple batters, runner had moved to third. So runners on the corners and 2 outs. And I think it was an 0-2 count or an 0-1 count. And the runner at third base, Blake Jackson, decided to steal home plate. It's kind of a bizarre decision at the time, just because it was, that's a pretty bold move, right? Try to steal home to take the lead in the 10th inning. But anyway, he tries to steal home. Guidry throws home. Neal makes the catch, tags Jackson out by a mile. Seems like the inning's over. Both teams head to the dugout. LSU's getting ready to the plate. Everyone's in the on deck circle. South Carolina's in the field. The pitcher's warming up, and all that. But then the umpires convened, and then they convened some more, and then they convened some more, and then they talked to the then they talked to both teams' coaches. Jay Johnson suddenly got ejected. There was no announcement from the umpires as to what was happening at all. Everybody was confused. Everyone in the press box was confused. Everyone in the field, on the field, in the stands, everybody was confused except for, maybe the 4 or 5 umpires that were on the field. Even they seemed like they were confused at times because, again, it was an 18-minute delay on top of the fact that Jay Johnson got ejected, on top of the fact that LSU tried to protest the game because it was because everything that was going on was so vague. And they ended up not being able to protest the game because it was a judgment call on the field, but we can get into that later. So all in all of a sudden, the runner at first ends up at second base. The runner at third, who was stealing at home, Jackson, he scores on the play. The runner at second is Cole Messina. And then the batter at the plate, Parker Noland at the time, he goes to first base. And so all of a sudden, Griffin Herring's on the mound, and there's runners on first and second and 2 outs. Herring gets a ground out to end the inning, but everyone isn't 100% sure as to what just happened. And I think now's probably the right time to sort of get into it as to why what happened.
Okay, so before we get to that, though, you made mention of it just now, but does anybody in the press box, including you, have really any kind of clue as to what the hell's going on?
No. I was sort of tweeting my way through my feelings a little bit, being honest, just like trying to what I think is maybe happening and what I'm just seeing on the field. And then all of a sudden Jay Johnson gets ejected. So it went from a level 1 concern to a level 5 concern, so
to level 5 confusing too.
Yes.
I mean, it's
that's
very hard to parse out because, I mean, let's be honest. And this is where, we'll ask you to get into it and explain as best you can. When's the last time you saw catchers balk? So, with that, let's get into it.
I have never seen a catcher's balk in a game. At least I don't think I have. I do know that it existed because
yes,
from the recesses of my memory, I took an umpiring class when I was in high school. It was with my dad and one of his friends, and we all took an umpiring class to maybe umpire some Little League games. And this was when I was a teenager. And I remember catcher's balk being one of the very, very obscure things that they would mention in these meetings. And this is something that the umpire should know in the very, very back of their heads. And that's why they had to meet and make sure that this happened. But with all that said, here's why they made the call based on at least their interpretation and even from what I saw from the play. So where do I start here? When Griffin Herring threw to home plate, he was the key thing to know here is that his foot was on the mound. His foot was on the rubber. So therefore he is making a pitch. And since he is making a pitch, the catcher cannot step out in front of home plate or on home plate as the runner from third is trying to steal, or if it's a squeeze play, he can't do it. He can't do that either.
Because this is technically a pitch, correct? And therefore the batter has to have a chance to, right.
Exactly. Therefore, because since this is a pitch, then the catcher is now interfering with the batter's ability to hit the ball, and he's also causing a balk because if he's stepping out in front of the plate, he's acting as if the play is live, but it's a pitch. Right. So the runner at third has the right to go home on the pitch and has the bag, if that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if Herring had simply stepped off the mound, stepped off the rubber, and had thrown home, none of this happens because therefore the play is live and home plate is treated as if the runner trying to steal third base or second base, and he's trying to pick him off. That's what it turns into. But since his foot was on the rubber and he was throwing home, that's a pitch. And since it's a pitch, then Neal isn't necessarily restricted to the catcher's box, which I saw there was some talk about that. He's allowed to have a foot outside the catcher's box. That's not the question. That's not the issue here. It's the fact that he stepped over or onto home plate. In this case, he was in front of home plate. And because of that, that's a balk. Because again, it not only doesn't impede the hitter, it's also technically impeding the third baseman, the runner at third, because it's a pitch on the play.
Right. It's not a pitch until after it crosses the player, gets past the plate, and then the catcher catches it, and therefore that's when the play is live.
Yeah.
Okay. So even Jay Johnson says, and I quote from your story up at theadvocate.com, quote, "I've never seen that call before. I've got to be honest. Long time coaching baseball, 24 years now or whatever," end quote. So clearly it's not just the casual fan who's, perplexed and maybe seen something that he or she has never seen before.
Exactly. And I'll say this call is just rarely made because either one of the teams never points it out or the umpires just don't catch it in the moment. And that's one of the reasons why it took 18 minutes to figure it out. That's one of the reasons why it only happened because Mark Kingston on the South Carolina dugout pointed it out to the umpires, being like, "Hey, I think this just happened." And then the umpires had to convene, and that's why it took forever. And if you want to argue at the fact that, why did it take so long? Why didn't they just catch it in the moment? It's just very hard to put that on too much of that on the umpires, because again, this is such a rare scenario. And I think I was talking with Todd Politz after all this had gone down, and Todd works for LSU, and he's volunteering as one of the SID helpers for the SEC this weekend. And he said that there was a play in the Tennessee Vanderbilt game on, I believe, Wednesday, where something like this pretty much happened and it just wasn't called. So, it's just kind of bad luck for LSU in that moment, that the fact that someone even caught it or even thought of it in the first place, because it's a rule and it's by the rule book, but it's such a rare play that no one really calls it, even if it's something that does happen, maybe slightly more often than we think it does. So, it's just bad luck for LSU, if I'm being totally honest, because I don't think I don't want to blame the umpires too much for this, because again, like, they went by the rule book and got the call right, because ultimately Herring's foot was on the mound, on the rubber, and that's the key, on the rubber. And Brady Neal did step in front of home plate. So because of those two things happened, that is by a rule, that is a catcher's block. So it's absolute madness. But I think LSU fans are going to hate me when I say this. I think they got the call right.
So one of the other sub-layers, as you mentioned, one of the other sub-layers to making this so difficult and making it an 18-minute ordeal for them to sort out is that this play is not reviewable.
Yeah. Exactly.
So they it's not like soccer where they can go to VAR or something like that. LSU tries to protest this play under protest. Explain to us why they couldn't really protest.
But because it's a judgment call, right? Okay. So it's a judgment whether Neal was on or in front of home plate. And for that reason, you can't really protest a call that's just purely based on a judgment. And the fact that you can't review it means you can't really go back and see whether they had actually made the right call or not. But if you look back at the video, Brady Neal is at least over, if not in front of home plate.
Oh, it's not up for debate. It's not up for debate as to whether he's over the plate or not.
Exactly.
The only thing that's really in question is whether Griffin Herring came off the rubber.
And he was definitely on the rubber. He was going through a pitching motion, and it was like it was almost like a pitch out, like a situation, right? And and again, like, if Griffin Herring simply takes his foot off the rubber and throws the home, none of this happens, because it gives the catcher more leeway to treat home plate as if the shortstop would treat second base, or as if the third baseman would treat third base in a similar situation, like a pickoff situation. Think of it like that. But it's not a pickoff situation if he's still on the rubber and just throwing home. It's a pitch.
So one way or the other, this comes about. And of course, LSU fans are none too pleased. Jay Johnson clearly none too pleased. He gets tossed. We will get to his status here in a moment. The fans are not happy. One way or the other, we move on. And Koki, this may be, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this may be why we love baseball so much. because somebody like Mike Fontenot or Dustin Pedroia or Lenny Dykstra, or in this case, Steven Milam, all 5'8", 172 pounds of him, Monster Milam, takes care of business. It doesn't matter really what happens with a catcher's balk when the smallest guy out there on the diamond connects for a home run to walk him off. How about that? Take us through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hayden Dravinsky draws a walk, and then Monster Milam comes up and just takes that high fastball and drives it out of the park as a right-handed hitter when he's a switch hitter and a natural lefty. And it's just more evidence that Milam has really figured out SEC pitching. And this, and this is not just something that's happened during the SEC tournament. This is something that's been brewing for the last couple of weeks in SEC play. And it's something that he had a lot of trouble with for really the first half of SEC play. And now he's not only hitting the ball, but he's driving the ball. And you're kind of seeing that power from him. And if he keeps on playing like this, that's a major league player. And I don't care about his size. And I mean, Jose Altuve exists, and Dustin Pedroia.
Yeah, we talked about Dustin Pedroia, Lenny Dykstra, these little guys. I mean,
and the key thing for him, if he wants to be a major leaguer, is to show off that power. And the fact that he can do it now from both sides of the plate is really a huge development for LSU, and obviously for his future prospects as a pro player. And it was just an absolutely remarkable moment. I mean, I remember as I was trying to write about what the heck just happened in the top of that inning with the whole, catcher's balk situation, he hits the home run, and I'm just like, you got to be kidding me! Like, this is unbelievable chaos.
Well, I mean, and that was the end of the chaos, and the catcher's balk was clearly the most explosive part of the chaos. But it was a day of chaos from start to finish. Let's talk about LSU falling behind 8-0, and somehow coming all the way back. I mean, this has been. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Koki, but we're talking about, is this seven in a row now, going back to Ole Miss?
Yes.
Well, I guess 8 in a row if you want to count the. Well, no, 7 would be 7 in a row because it didn't play a midweek game in the last. Yeah. Yes, 7 in a row, including some of the heaviest of heavy hitters here at the SEC tournament: Georgia, Kentucky, 2 over a fairly game South Carolina team. And now they're going to face Tennessee. If anybody would have told you 2 weeks ago that they're going to go 7-0 against the schedule, I don't know that anybody would have really believed it. Would have required something of a willful suspension of disbelief. But they go ahead. They had to throw a whole bunch of guys because there wasn't a whole bunch of outs to be had early on in this game. And we discussed, obviously, when they got to Saturday, they were probably going to be. It might be a bullpen game, regardless of how well the bullpen throws. But one way or the other, you saw 9 pitchers in this game. You get all the way back to 10-10, and then Griffin Herring comes in, and you see what happens. But how about this run? How about this run by the LSU baseball team? And then we'll get to Jay Johnson and whether he's going to be around in the dugout for the championship game against Tennessee on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it was already a wild and crazy run before today, before any sort of catcher's interference or catcher's block or any of that stuff, or any Steven Milam walk-off home run. I mean, just the dominant wins over Georgia and Kentucky, when you have your best pitchers on the mound like that, showed that they, for the first time really all season, they played like a team that could make the College World Series easily. Yes. Not just make it, but make it easily. They played like a team. They played like last year's team. Like, that's what it felt like. And when they had dominant pitching on the mound and good offense that could punish mediocre pitching, which is exactly what you saw in those 2 games. And then you saw the madness of the first South Carolina game, where Michael Braswell has the revenge game of his life, and he has the go-ahead single to give them the lead after they are down by 3 runs in the 8th inning and down by a run heading into the 9th. And that was a comeback victory within its own. And it's been I think like the evolution of the offense has probably been the most impressive thing this week, even if there is one major caveat with a lot of this, at least from an offensive standpoint, and that is the fact that they haven't faced, in any of these games, they haven't faced the opposing team's top pitchers.
That's correct. Right. The one thing you can say, I'm sorry, Cook, I just want to jump in because this is going to fall out of my head. You know how I am. If there's one thing you want to say that's just fantastic, over and above the fact that obviously they won enough to make sure that they are a surefire NCAA tournament team. But if you if you take it for face value, you beat Georgia, you beat Kentucky, you beat South Carolina, which is a good team, twice, and now you're facing Tennessee. Listen, it doesn't matter what kind of regional you get put in. There's not going to be a regional field that's as strong as that one right there. And LSU has won 4 games in a row, much as they may have to do in a regional. But there is that one caveat, as you said, which is they've yet to face somebody's ace. And rest assured, either on Friday or on Saturday, the first or second game of whatever regional they find themselves in, they may wind up facing aces back to back, depending on what kind of draw they get. But I'm sorry, I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly as you said. I mean, Georgia and those games weren't important enough for Georgia and Kentucky to move up their top guys and pitch them on 4 or 5 days of rest. The games just weren't important enough for them. Georgia's locked into a hosting spot. Kentucky is going to be a national seed. So given that, and that they were facing, I don't know, they're midweek guys basically. You should score 8 runs and 11 runs in those games, and they did, that's a good sign. Like there have been times this season where they have faced teams as day 3 pitching, and they just haven't scored enough runs to win. And that's been
that was the rule actually. That was the rule rather than the exception for most of the SEC play. Yeah,
exactly. And then with the South Carolina team, they're a weird team that they don't really have starting pitching. They just have a bunch of relievers. They have like 3 or 4 relievers who are semi-reliable, and that's a team that wins on offense. So you kind of had to outslug them to win these games, and then they barely outslugged them in both of these games. They just did enough to win, and South Carolina's defense helped them a lot these last 2 games. I cannot, say that enough. Like they played some of the worst defense you will see in this conference over the last 2 days. They just have. I think they probably had at least 10 errors over their 4-game stretch, which is crazy, but it's true.
Oh no, certainly in the game on Thursday, the defense melted down. I mean, you can make that case obviously for Saturday as well. Nice, not for nothing, but nice of Michael Braswell to have his, just as you say, call it a revenge game if you like, but playing a little bit more. I know he kicked one around earlier in the tournament, but his defense has been much better too. Yeah,
the whole team's defense has played very well, really, in the last couple of weeks, but especially in this tournament. Like that's been really highlighted. I mean, obviously you have Alex Milazzo behind the plate. You have Michael Braswell making better plays at shortstop. You already had plus defender at second base. Tommy White didn't have the best day today at third base, but he's been a lot better than he was last year. Jared Jones's improvement at first base. You already had plus defensive outfielders out there, and all of a sudden you have yourself a pretty good defense, and their defense is playing a lot better right now overall, I'd say. And then offensively, again, like they're punishing mediocre to bad pitching, which is what you should be doing. And that's a good thing. Even if you want to say that, when they face one of these teams with great pitching, what's it going to look like? Right. But they have faced some good pitchers this year, and the results haven't been as, I guess, poor as you would expect them to be, given how they've had their ups and downs,
Right. I mean, we just got done saying they for whatever reason never capitalized on the Sunday starters, going against the Sunday starters, the game 3 starters against, in so many of those SEC series, which means that if they were getting their wins, in all likelihood, they were getting their wins against the game 1 or game 2 starters. So it's an odd thing. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, Koki, because I do want to get to this. This is something that I'm sure everybody wants to know. We haven't addressed it yet. Jay Johnson, he gets ejected. In this weird 18-minute exchange on Saturday. Is he available to be in the dugout on Sunday at 2:00 when the Tigers face Tennessee?
Yes, he is. There was a question as to whether he would be available after the game because it was his second ejection of the season. And if you're ejected twice, apparently you are awarded a suspension for the next game. And that ended up just not being the case, whether it was because it was in the SEC tournament and not in the regular season. That's not totally clear, but he will be available to coach on this championship game. So that's definitely good news for LSU. And that's definitely, good for Jay Johnson's psyche, because the poor guy would be a mess if he couldn't coach this game. So yeah, that definitely scores that.
So let's talk about LSU and Tennessee. They obviously played 3 times up in Knoxville earlier this year, last month, April 12th, 13th, and 14th. Loss. Tennessee beats them 6-3 in the first game. It beats them 3-1 in the second game. Beats them 8-4 in the third game. First things first. Who pitches for LSU in this championship game on Sunday up at Hoover Met?
That's a fantastic question, Perrin. I don't think anyone really knows. I don't know if I mean, we can go in Jay Johnson's hotel room right now and ask him, and he probably wouldn't even give us a straight answer.
If he knows, he's not giving an answer. Jay Johnson,
Yeah,
as you and I have discussed, has a lot of football coach in him, where he's going to do a little bit of cloak and dagger stuff, which is
exactly.
right.
Exactly. There's that, but I also think genuinely, like Tennessee kind of just beat Vanderbilt, so they didn't even know who they were going to play, let alone who they were going to pitch and who's available to pitch. And there's some names that I think we could very easily see. Like I think Nate Atkinhausen, the fact that he'll be on 2 days of rest after throwing 30 some odd pitches on Wednesday. I think he'd be available. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. I think Griffin Herring could maybe potentially be available. I've got to double check his pitch count from today, but I don't think it was anything major. But I also don't think they can throw him like 50 pitches either. Christian Little will also be on 2 days rest, but he threw like 51 pitches against South Carolina. So his availability is a little bit questionable in this game. But I mean, every guy you could possibly think of, except for Cam Johnson, pitched today,
Correct.
So I don't know how willing they are to throw these guys who aren't necessarily top of the line guys in this championship game on no days rest tomorrow.
It's also a question of how much do you want it, or how much do you want this win versus how much do you want to burn up. You and I were talking before we went on air, and by the letter of the law, so to say, you could throw Gage Jump and he would be going on 4 days rest, which is of course sort of the standard amount of rest for a major league pitcher. It certainly has been. And he went on 4 days rest to face Georgia in the opener of the tournament on Tuesday and was lights out. So you could do that if you wanted to. The question is, how much does LSU gain out of this? Do you want to burn up Gage Jump and put another 60, 70, 80, however many pitches on that arm when you're going to have to go into a regional? Part of the reason I bring this up is because, okay, if they thought that they could get all the way up to a number 1 seed at host, well, maybe it's worth it. I personally don't think you can do that. I know some people have been asking about that. I don't think they can get all the way up to their struggles throughout really the first 2/3 to 3/4 of the season has to count for something. And I just don't think they can get up that high. If I'm not mistaken, the last I saw their RPI is something like 24. And so I don't think that's realistic. And therefore, how much do you gain by winning or losing this game and also burning up Gage Jump and, some of your frontline guys?
The interesting thing is when it comes to like a metric standpoint, if they beat Tennessee, it's like they're in the ballpark if you just kind of erased your memory from the 3-12 start, because they're 20th in RPI right now as we speak. And if they beat Tennessee, that they're probably going to be around 17 at least, maybe even higher than that. Again, that's the number 1 team in the country you just beat. And at least 18, I'd say. And that kind of gets you into hosting range more than say Mississippi State and their fans and that team has been talking about needing to host forever and for a while now. And they're like, they've dropped down to like 25th in RPI. So that kind of gives you an idea of like, weirdly, if you just stare at the metrics, right. And KPI, which is the other, I guess, resume comparison metric tool that the committee will be using. They're 16th in it. That was before today. So now with today's win, they're probably, in the top 15. So if you consider those two things and you didn't know that they went 3-12 in conference play, you'd be like, oh, they're in contention to host. I don't think the committee is going to look at it that way. Personally, I would be pretty shocked if they hosted, even if they won against Tennessee. Not even if they won. So I do agree with that's the long way of saying I do totally agree with you that I don't think this game means a whole ton to them, because especially after winning today, Like, I say all that because in part also because like they're locked into it too. Like, it's no question right now. Like, if they don't get a 2, then someone needs to like, I think we need to like check the committee's heads, because like this team has undeniably played their way into a 2 seed, probably even a high 2 seed, if I'm being totally honest. And because of that, like the fact that we're even having this conversation about hosting is absolutely crazy.
Is wild. Is wild because again, 2 weeks ago we would have been talking about, well, looks like they're done for the summer probably.
Yeah, exactly. And even a week ago we thought, I think they're going to make the tournament
50-50.
Yeah.
Pretty close to 50-50. This has been a remarkable run, no matter how you slice it. Well, so Koki, what else are you looking for? LSU versus Tennessee, and just I know we discussed this maybe a little bit, but sum up what you've seen out of the lineup. We discussed a little bit about the defense. The bullpen obviously had a pretty rough day on Saturday, but nonetheless, this suddenly has the markings of a team that I don't mind telling you 50-50 now, whether they make a super regional, just from my own personal opinion in terms of the way they're playing, how far they could get, and things of that nature. I'm not saying it's a given that they're going to win a regional. That's crazy, but they went from looking pretty sloppy, for much of the season to it wouldn't surprise me at all if they come out of a regional and win a regional and head off to the supers. So just tell us what you've seen out of this team over the past, say, 10 to 12 games.
If they keep on playing like this, and especially with the first 2 games that they won here in Hoover, they're going to make the College World Series if they keep on playing like this. Like, it's just really high-level baseball, from the pitching staff to the offense taking advantage of mediocre pitching. And even against good pitching, we've seen them score, 2 runs against Hagen Smith. Not a lot of teams have even done that. We've seen them light up Bryce Cunningham on Vanderbilt. We've seen them, like challenge a Jack Caglione. We've seen them against some of the best pitchers in this conference and therefore this country. And we've seen them at the very least contend. And they're not going to face an SEC team, whatever regional they go to. And I'm not guaranteeing them a spot in Omaha, let alone a super regional. But I just think that if you just simply look at the way this team is playing and you look at the competition, and especially when they have Jumper Holman on the mound, they're probably going to be picked to win not just that regional, but potentially that super regional as well. Like, when the national pundits are going to be asked, "Oh, what non-host do you think is going to make the College World Series?" A lot of them are going to pick LSU just because of what we've seen lately.
Koki, we talked about this. Certainly you and I did, and many others. I'm just going to make up give me just a random team that's likely to host a regional. Just make one
Oklahoma.
up for me, just here on the fly. Okay, Oklahoma. That's a good one. We were talking about this when it looked like LSU was going to be a number 3 seed. How'd you like to be Oklahoma? You get, you're going to host the Norman Regional, and then you see these guys come in as a number 3 seed. That's got to be just from the uniforms alone. That's got to be nightmare fuel for anybody who's hosting. Now you're talking about, a team that's played its way into a number 2 seed, but also looks like one of the better, playing like one of the better teams in the country right now. So
exactly.
Certainly anything is on the table.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, like, can they keep this up, and will they keep this up? Like, can they keep this up? Absolutely. Will they? Is it just a much more complex question, because you're burning a lot of fuel this week at the SEC tournament, and you're gonna have to hit the road, and you have to keep on playing at this level in order to reach the lofty goals that you had at the very beginning of the season. So it's going to be a lot, and I'm really curious to see if they can just keep this up, because it's hard for any team to keep up this level of play, let alone with all these emotional victories. And I'm just really, I'm not, there's no guarantee of anything, and I'm just really curious to see, like, can they keep this up? And it's just going to be a lot to keep this up, because again, they're burning a lot of fuel here, even if they aren't necessarily pushing pitchers, trying not to push pitchers too hard. It's more than just that.
A thrilling week at the SEC tournament in Hoover, Alabama. And not for nothing, but the LSU softball team has been pushed to a Game 3. Stanford defeats LSU 3-0 in the second game of the Stanford Super Regional. So Beth Tarina's team will be playing for a berth in Oklahoma City in the Women's College World Series at 8:30 p.m. Sunday night. And that will come just a few hours after LSU faces Tennessee in the championship game of the SEC tournament in Hoover, Alabama, at the end of what has been just a thrilling ride at the SEC tournament for the LSU baseball team. At a time when we were, again, 2 weeks ago, wondering whether the postseason was going to be a real possibility for the LSU baseball team. So they have given us something to talk about, something to keep a close eye on yet again at the LSU campus. And so that has made so many LSU fans, of course, pretty happy as they head into the Memorial Day weekend. So Koki, this has been a pleasure. You're certainly getting your money's worth. I hope the hotel vending machine is not empty. You're going to need a little more caffeine to start your day and keep your weekend going. But this has been quite a bit of fun just to see this sort of lunacy unfold. It's been lunacy in the best sort of way. Again, LSU versus Tennessee at 2 p.m. Sunday on ESPN2. The rest of the tournament has been on the SEC Network. This will be on ESPN2 to close out one way or the other what has been a wild ride at the SEC tournament. Koki, anything you want to add before we sign off for the day?
Just that I do think it's interesting. Tennessee only used 2 pitchers today. So their pitching, in theory, is in better shape than LSU's heading into this game. But when you reach the SEC tournament final, no one's pitching is in good shape. Like, no.
Yes.
So they're going to have to score probably at least 8 runs in this game to win it. But with the way things have been going on the last few days, I mean, nothing surprised me at this point. I mean, when this team went down 8-0, it just felt like, another one of those Sundays where they ran out of pitching and the offense just couldn't really carry them. I mean, this team was 1-8 in game 3s of SEC series heading into the Ole Miss series. They have now won in not just 1-8 in those situations, but 1-8 in situations where Holman and Jump didn't pitch against the SEC competition. And now they've won 3 straight of those games against Ole Miss and South Carolina twice. So it just tells you how much things have changed for this team lately.
Late May for the LSU baseball team, and they're making a charge yet again because why wouldn't they? It's that time of year. Koki, it's been a pleasure. Again, I hope you get a decent shower and a decent night's sleep, and you got a fresh round of caffeine at the ballpark at Hoover Met. Appreciate you jumping on here as we're coming to you late on a Saturday night. We'll post this on Sunday morning to give everybody something to look forward to and to recap what has been not only a wild day, but a wild run through the SEC tournament. For Koki Riley, I'm Pierre Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.